Thank you so much.
Everything you need?
I do have everything I need, thank you. Please sit down. Hi guys, how are we all tonight? I'm super excited to be here with you and to be a part of celebrating MUV Talks' 6th birthday. We've given several rounds of applause already for that, so how great is that? And to talk about new beginnings. So for those of you who haven't met me, my name's Izzy, and I'm currently working as a junior doctor in the Auckland region, but not for long. And you're probably wondering a bit about why a rogue junior doctor's here to give a hot take on rebranding. Take it up with Pauli. But I imagine it's probably because she asked me to share my story here tonight, because over the last probably decade or so of pursuing the pathway to medicine, at the beginning of this year I decided it was time to stop, take a step back, and change direction. So now over the course of the year I've been in the process of putting down the stethoscope, and I don't know what the startup equivalent would be, probably picking up slack, and leaving the clinical world for good. So before we deep dive into that a little bit, I thought, because I'm a type A doctor, I'd give you an agenda for the next 5 minutes or so. So we'll first start with the why behind my own rebranding or restart. Then we'll get to the hot take portion of the next 5 minutes, and that'll be what I think is kind of missing from the conversation about rebranding. And then I'll throw down a kind of minor take-home challenge, like no pressure to take it, but feel free if you like. So yeah, enjoy. Hope you guys have an awesome night and take everything I say with a grain of salt. So we'll kick off with the why behind my rebranding. So for me personally, I'd wanted to be a doctor since I was about 12 years old. So it was a really long pursuit of medicine, and there were a couple of different things that drove that, but for me I think it was this idea of impact and wanting to create some kind of positive impact on the world with my skills and knowledge. And like, what could be more impactful than being a doctor, right? You use your knowledge and skills to help treat or manage diseases, help people feel better. I was wrong. Once I started work, I found I was consistently feeling like the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. And what I mean by that is, as a clinician, you're kind of perfectly poised to see how all the different factors in society work together to impact on someone's health, but within your scope of practice, you're so limited in the impact you can actually make on those things. So it's kind of like treating the damage after it's already been done, rather than preventing it from happening in the first place. So ultimately what it came down to for me was that the impact I was actually making in my day-to-day practice was not actually looking like the impact I wanted to make long-term. Into startups. When I was thinking about what to do next, I felt that some of the most disruptive change we've seen as a society has been a result of business and products that fundamentally change the way we live and work. So to me, I think the people building startups today are basically creating the future that we're going to live in the next 10, 20, 50 years' time. And I don't know about you guys, but I really want to be a part of that. And it's really funny because shifting focus from medicine to startups wasn't actually something I'd consciously thought of as rebranding until Pauli asked me to speak at this event. So I did actually Google it to see I was the right person to be here. But what I found really interesting in what I was reading on Google and so forth was that when we talk about rebranding, the focus is always around the external component of that. So it's what we put out into the world, our kind of brand messaging, our colours, our imaging, and how others perceive us. But I think in focusing on the external side of things, we actually miss a really critical part, probably the most important part of the rebranding journey, which comes one step before that. The missing piece. This is the hot take bit, by the way. And that's getting really clear on the who and the why of what you're doing. Because I would argue this is the most important step. What you put out into the world comes from that kind of understanding of your own identity as a person in an organisation. And if you're not clear on that, how on earth are you going to communicate that effectively to someone else? What I also found really interesting was the way we kind of construct and understand our own identity. I hadn't really realised it for myself, but I'd kind of constructed the narrative around who I was around a series of I am or am not statements. So for me, the big one was, I am a doctor. And so when that was really challenged in my life, it became very, very difficult because it was a fundamental part of who I thought I was. So we all kind of do this, right? I'm a doctor, I'm a businesswoman, I'm not a public speaker, or on an organisational level, like we are a SaaS company or we're a food tech company. And in isolation, these statements kind of seem innocuous, but altogether they influence that larger narrative around what we tell ourselves about who we are. And that, in turn, becomes the story that we tell others. So to me, effective rebranding starts with a fundamental challenge of those statements that we tell ourselves and who we understand ourselves to be. And I think a really powerful example of this, swiping from Apple, it's the difference between saying we're a computer company or we are powering people through technology. One is automatically much more compelling and immediately gives you an idea of who that person is and what they stand for, or organisation. It's kind of reframing those statements around rather roles and skills to values and impact. And so that's kind of what I took out of my rebranding journey, was reframing from I am a doctor to now I'm a person who's passionate about creating spaces for people to thrive. And that lets me think a lot more laterally about how I can actually affect change. So the little take-home challenge part from me was to kind of, for yourselves, identify your am and am not statements. What are the things that you tell yourself about who you are as a person or an organisation? And how does that influence the story that you then in turn tell others? And I thought I'd end with something really cringe, which is quoting myself right now, which is the story that you tell others has to start with the story you tell yourself. So let's be conscious about that. Thank you.